Welcome guys to this video where we'll cover the game between Aryan Tari and Alireza Firouzja in the 6th round of Norway chess. Aryan, who's had a tough tournament, managed to beat young Christoph Duda in the tiebreak, but he came up short against Alireza Firouzja in their two classical games. He didn't manage to wrestle any points out of his Iranian opponent, but he at least managed to participate in two pretty cool games, including this one in the Caro-Kann. Alireza Firouzja, still unbeaten in the classical portion of the tournament, managed to convincingly beat Aryan in this game. So we'll take a look at how that game unfolded. e4, c6, d4, d5, and the exchange variation of the Caro-Kann. Caro-Kann has been the pet line of Alireza in this tournament so far, and he's scored pretty well with this. Bishop d3, knight f6, c3. This might not be the most theoretical or ambitious variation to play against the Caro-Kann, but it's been quite popular with the Norwegian players the last couple of years, especially thanks to Magnus and his efforts in this variation, which could resemble some sort of London setup, only a mirrored kind of version of this. Bishop g4 from Alireza, queen b3, threatening b7, which is of course protected. The bishop goes back, knight f3, knight c6, castles, and e6. And even though the bishop is inside the pawn chain here, Alireza still is quite confident of his chances in the game, because his plan long term is to play bishop d6 and then go for something like f6, e5 to break in the center, which is in fact what he did in the game. Rook e1 from Aryan, still pretty standard stuff, and nothing to criticize or even discuss so far. Now it's interesting to see what direction Aryan chooses to go, because he played bishop g5. There's lots of options here. Number one is this queen might be a bit misplaced on b3. There's not lots going on here, so maybe queen d1 is an option as well. And then decide where to go with the pieces. But as we can see, there's not a lot of space for white to move forward with his pieces in the center. I mean, the e5 square is well protected. c4 is a big decision, not so sure this is a good solution yet. Where to put these two guys to finish development, it's not so easy, so maybe Aryan needs to look at the opening in detail even earlier, and then this point in the game. This is the 11th move for white, and to be able to get a nice and dynamic position, white might need to check out his play earlier in the game, or even switch variations, which would be my recommendation, but that's just a matter of taste, of course. Bishop g5, castles, knight d2, knight h5. Could just note, guys, that bishop takes f6 is not a big concern for black in this position. You go gf6 and you tuck the king away in the corner, and suddenly you have lots of play in the g file. So this would be suicidal for white. And not recommended in any way. So if something like queen c2, you can just go f5, right, and just stop this battery from functioning at all, and the pawn structure would be quite healthy for black, with an open g file to boast. Knight bd2, knight h5, queen d1, and now f6, which is the aforementioned setup that black wants in this kind of structure. Bishop e3, knight f4, bishop f1, and now g5 from Alireza, which is quite standard. It might look a bit airy for his king here, but and you know why go ahead and move your pawns in front of the king? Well, there's not any real danger for an attack against the black king here. The king can go to h8 and still use the g file, as Alireza does in the game, to attack Aryan on the king side. And in the meantime, I mean, there's no obvious play for white here. I mean, c4 is the only pawn break available to him, which is a good indicator of who's enjoying the initiative and who's which player that got that has the most easy position to play. I mean, because if you don't have any pawn breaks, you're dependent on making your pieces function without the assistance of any pawns. This is not so easy, and as we can see, Aryan didn't manage to do this in the game. He needed to play c4, but in this move he actually did, but it's a bit too late, because Alireza now has a very easy position to play on the king side, supported by pawns with pieces lurking in the background, and also king h8, rook g8 coming immediately now. Aryan's c4 break is nice, but even if he takes on d5, Alireza could retake with well, a knight and a pawn. He would probably take with the pawn to get control over these squares to limit Aryan's activity, and then continue by playing something like rook g8, g4 as he did in the game to open up on the king side. King h8 was met by rook c1 from Aryan. The plan is to, of course, expand and try to exploit some space advantage on the queen side. Rook g8, and now he took on f4, which is a big decision, but understandable, because he didn't want this knight to still be in the game after the g4 break, because this knight is looking pretty dangerous to me as well. So bishop f4 is of course a big decision, but understandable. But after black retook with his bishop, then we can see that Alireza enjoys the pair of bishops in a semi-open position. At least it will be open in a couple of moves. And the bishop pair, in combination with an open g-file, is dangerous. b4 from Aryan, which is a nice move, but it's not too bothersome for black. Queen d6, threatening this pawn, and of course trying to force Aryan to advance. And of course this might have been Aryan's plan as well, but there's no pawn breaks available to him now. He's pretty much locked himself out of the queen side. Even though this pawn majority is looking pretty nice, then there's not a lot of play going on the queen side, while Alireza is threatening g4. g3, g4, nice move. If gf4, then gf3 is curtains. This is just lost. The open g file is too much for white to handle, so hg, rook g4, bishop h3, then just rook g7. Please note that he didn't go for rook g8 here, because he wants to, of course, double rooks. This is an important point. Please also note that bishop takes e6 is no good in this position. It's of course, if this was a good move, then Aryan would win a pawn, but the bishop takes g3 is completely over. The king on g1 is almost dead already. So thanks to the open g file, the king on g1 is under heavy fire. King h1 instead, and now e5, both advancing and at the same time protecting the pawn. An exchange of pieces, and now queen h3 is a threat as well, in combination with g3 being picked off by the bishop on f4. So again, Aryan needs to address this threat. Knight h2, still queen h3, and after a double of rooks, we can see that the position for Aryan is quite difficult to play. I mean, there's lots of stuff happening in the g file, and there's only a matter of time before there will be a sacrifice on g3. If gf4 already, we can see that the rook on g1 is protected, but rook g2 is a hammer blow that decides the game immediately. So that's no good for white. He instead goes for rook c3, knight f5, and now Aryan decided, okay, I'm going to take my chances in this variation. He sacrificed a piece, but it's not enough, because Alireza, of course, sharp as ever, plays bishop g3, sacrifices the bishop. You can't take this, of course, because there's lots of opportunities for black to retake, and the king, of course, again in trouble on h1. Rook g2 to protect from the mate on h2, but now Alireza changes pace, shifts focus over to the e file, Now rook e1 is a threat and will decide the game immediately. So if rook c1 to protect from this, then this of course would be an imminent decider of the game. Now rook g8 for example, or even knight h4 after rook g2 would decide. So after rook e8, with rook e1 coming up next, Aryan decided to throw in the towel and resign against Alireza Firouzja.